Some books may be a little older, but however, it's a good resource for you.
CompTIA refers to these as
All right.
domain.
Remember to look for PDF. So what I'm going to do is let you settle in this morning, get your coffee, tea, Gatorade, Red Bull, whatever tickles your fancy. But we'll get ready with a lecture around 10. It's one of the smaller lectures for today. But today you get to ease on into the morning. And if you need something, I am here. I am here.
And that makes up 20% of your exam. A majority of the questions that you'll get on your exam are multiple choice questions. You'll get a single question and multiple answers to select from. That's obviously very straightforward. You can choose A, B, C, or D. And if you get the right answer, then you earn points for that question. But CompTIA also asks other types of questions. You may get a handful of these questions at the very beginning of your exam. These are questions that might be matching, drag and drop.
For small business owners, accidentally hiring an energy vampire, I'm gonna have to push back on that, can be a real nightmare.
Sorting, or some other type of question format. CompTIA refers to these as performance-based questions, and they require you to perform a task or complete some other type of process that's different than a typical multiple-choice question. To be able to answer these multiple-choice questions or performance-based questions, you'll need to know the content that comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And these videos step through every single bullet that's in those objectives to be sure that you know exactly what's expected to you when you walk into the exam room. Those official objectives are free for you to download, and they are a wealth of information. You can get a link from them directly at CompTIA.org. I have links on the Professor Messer website that will lead you also to the correct pages on the CompTIA website. Once you have those exam objectives, you can put them side by side with our videos and step through each video at a time to cover every topic from the objectives. I also recommend that you get a good book. We have some choices that might be good for you on the Professor Messer website, and get plenty of hands-on so you can try out some of these different ideas and techniques in your own time using your own system. And before you walk into your actual exam, you might want to step through a series of practice exams. And we have plenty of practice exams on the Professor Messer website for you to go through. You'll notice that the exam objectives from CompTIA are numbered by domain and subdomain numbers. And my videos are numbered exactly the same way, which makes it very easy for you to look at a topic in the exam objectives and immediately find the right video that correlates back to those topics. If you're using a third-party book, it's very common that there would be an appendix for cross-reference, where they may give you a list of the CompTIA exam objectives at the very beginning of a chapter. That makes it very easy for you to correlate what's in your book with the appropriate videos to watch for that topic. We've designed this course so that you can start at the beginning and watch all the way through, or if you're reading a book or need to find a particular topic, you can easily jump into a video, learn exactly what you need to learn, and jump right back out again. You can use the technique that works best for your style of study. There are two different ways to take your exam. You could either take it at a testing center or you can take it at home. There are advantages and disadvantages to both, so you should find the method that works best for you. A third-party testing center is usually a training center, a community college, or something very similar. And they have inside of their facility a training room specifically set up to provide these exams. That means all you have to do is register for your exam and show up at the right time at the testing center, and they'll take care of everything from there. CompTIA wants you to have as secure a testing environment at home as they can provide in a testing center, so be sure to check the CompTIA website so that you know the rules and regulations when you're taking an exam in your home. That's everything you need to get started. You can check the Professor Messer website for books, training videos, and so much more. Whether you're stepping through our comprehensive video training course, you're looking through our course notes or practice exams, everything you need to be successful for this exam is available at ProfessorMesser.com. As I mentioned earlier, you'll also want the exam objectives, and I have a link to the CompTIA website from ProfessorMesser.com/objectives. We also maintain an amazing community of people that are working towards their certifications. You'll find our Discord chat is available at ProfessorMesser.com/Discord. And if you'd like to have some fun with your studies, join us for our monthly study groups where I ask you questions that come from the exam objectives, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of me regarding the exam technology, or anything else that you'd like to ask. We'll be with you for every step of your Security Plus studies, and we wish you the best with your certification efforts. We'll see you in the next video. If you've spent any amount of time in IT security, you know there are many different security risks that you need to prepare for. The attackers are looking for different ways to gain access to our systems, and we need to find different ways to prevent them from getting that access. But of course, we're not just protecting data, we're also protecting physical systems, buildings, people, and everything in our organization. In this video, we'll look at different security controls and how they can be used to prevent events from occurring in the first place. We can minimize the impact of events that ultimately do occur, and in many cases, we can limit the damage if someone does find a way into our computing environment. Let's look at some very broad categories of security controls. The first category we'll look at are technical controls. These are controls that we implement using some type of technical system. So if you're someone who is managing an operating system, you might set up policies and procedures within the operating system that would allow or disallow different functions from occurring. We can also do firewalls, antivirus, and other types of software in this category of controls.
Before I could use my mind to move a submarine.
CompTIA is located in forward compartment. Commence the emergency flow.
Before I knew.
As a security administrator, you'll also want to create a series of policies that
Good
tell
morning.
people the best way to manage their computers.
We're just
data,
working on
we refer to these as
coursework until 9, and we'll get into day 9. So just wanted to let you know. But if you need something up here, just let me know.
You'll often put these managerial controls inside of your security policies. You might also see these managerial controls implemented into day-to-day processes as part of your standard operating procedures. Another important control category are the operational controls. Unlike using technology to manage these controls, operational controls are using people to be able to set these controls. So if you have security guards at your place of work, you're doing monthly lunch and learns, or you have some type of posters or awareness program at work to help explain the best practices for IT security, then you can put these into the category of operational controls. And the last category that we have are physical controls. As the name implies, these are controls that would limit someone's physical access to a building, a room, or a device. This might be something like a guard shack, so they can check everyone coming into a particular area. Maybe there are fences and locks to keep people out, or maybe you use badge readers to limit the access into certain areas within your building. So in this video, we'll focus on these 4 categories of controls: the technical, managerial, operational, and physical. And in this video, we'll look at a number of different control types and determine where we would fit certain control types into certain categories. The first control type we'll look at is a preventive control type. This is a control type that limits someone access to a particular resource. You can think of this as something like a firewall rule, which would prevent somebody from gaining access to a particular area of your network, or it may be something that's more tangible, such as a guard shack checking everyone's identification as they come into your facility. A good way to test yourself with these different control types is to determine what category will a certain type fit into. So when we deal with preventive control types, we can look at firewall rules, and since those are handled at a technical level, then those would fit into the technical category. As we hire people, we may want to set a certain type of policy for onboarding, and those would be policies set as part of a managerial category. We've already mentioned a guard shack checking everyone's identification, and since that's done by a person, we can fit that into an operational category. And lastly, we have door locks, which are physical devices preventing access to a room, so that would fit into the physical category. Another important control type is a deterrent. And although a deterrent may not prevent someone from accessing a resource, it may give them a discouragement or have them think twice about the attack that they're planning. For example, when you start an application, there may be a splash screen that provides security information and restricts people who are not authorized from gaining access to that system. Or there might be the threat of a demotion or a dismissal if somebody gains access to data that they should not be accessing. There might also be a front reception desk greeting everyone who walks in, or warning signs telling people that if they gain access to this facility, that there would be consequences.
Elaine, did you do flex last night?
Into our 4 categories. A
Yeah.
splash screen is a deterrent.
You got a screenshot of
a demotion
what screen you're in?
managerial category.
What room you're in?
The reception desk fits into the operational category, and the warning signs are a physical deterrent. A detective control type can identify and in some cases warn us when a particular breach has occurred. This may not prevent access, but it would give us a warning and log information about that particular attack. An example of a detective control type may be a process of collecting, reviewing, and going through system logs, or you may be reviewing login reports about who's gained access to your systems. There might be someone patrolling the property looking for cases where someone might have broken into your facility, and you might have motion detectors so that you're automatically notified if something is moving in an area where normally there should be no motion. The system logs that are detailing everything that's going on in your system.
James, I was saying I sent the picture to you. I'm not sure if you received it. So right after I finished the flex room, I sent it.
It just registers with only my middle name. So that's why I can't find you. Yeah, I noticed that explains why. Now I could go back and look under what's your middle name? Raul, R-A-U-L. That would explain why. All right, let me do some investigation. Be back with you.
How are you guys doing? Good morning. I didn't see these messages earlier. So the kind of video that I'm doing, according to the title and the thumbnail, it's for this particular live. It's getting a certification for IT courses. So it's information technology.
Systems would fit into the technical category. Someone reviewing login reports every day or every week would fit into the managerial category. Someone controlling the property would be an operational category, and the motion detectors provide us with a physical category. If there is a notification that someone has breached a system or gained access into a certain area of your business, then you want to apply a corrective security control. A corrective security control is something that occurs after the event has been detected. This is sometimes able to reverse the impact of that particular event, or you may be able to continue operating with your business with minimal downtime thanks to these corrective controls. For example, if a computer has been infected with ransomware and it has encrypted everything on that system and made all of the data inaccessible, you can simply erase everything on that computer and restore it back to a known good system using your backups. You might also want to create policies so that if there are security issues or something unusual that you see happen, then those would be rolled up into an alert or some type of notification. And if you find that someone has jumped your fence or they've tried to get in through a door in your building, you may need to contact law enforcement to be able to correct that particular incident. And if something is caught on fire, you can grab a fire extinguisher and make sure that that fire doesn't spread any further, thereby correcting that particular event.
Get fresh groceries delivered to your door with Kroger Delivery, proudly serving King Soopers.
And as you might expect, those are 4 events that certainly fits into the 4 categories that we have. For example, recovering from a backup would be a technical category. Being able to have policies for reporting issues when they occur would be in the managerial category. Contacting authorities for some type of legal issue would be an operational category. And your fire extinguisher is a physical category. You might also find yourself in a situation where a security event has occurred, but you don't have the resources or means to be able to reverse what that particular event has caused. In those cases, you may want to use a compensating control type, which provides you with using other means in a way to control that particular security event. This may be something you use on a temporary basis until you're able to put together a plan to resolve the overall security incident. For example, you might have an application that is important for your organization, but the application developer has told you that they've identified a significant security vulnerability in that software. Since the application developer is going to provide you with a patch sometime in the future, you may want to set some type of firewall rule today that would prevent somebody from exploiting that particular vulnerability. Or this might be a case where you can separate different duties between different individuals and limit the scope of any type of security concern. Or you might have multiple security guards all working at the same time to make sure that no single security guard has complete access to everything in your environment. And if you lose power in your building, you might want to have a generator so that while you're waiting for main power to be restored, you can compensate by turning on your generator. Those are our 4 different categories of a compensating control. We have a technical category of blocking that traffic instead of patching the application. There may be a separation of duties for the people that work in your organization, and that fits into the managerial category. You might require multiple security staff working simultaneously, and that would be the operational category. And lastly, having a power generator to compensate for a power outage fits into the physical category. The last control type we'll look at is a directive control type. This is a relatively weak security control because it is one where you are directing someone to do something more secure rather than less secure. For example, you may require everyone to store sensitive information into a protected and encrypted folder on their system. This requires the user to make a decision about what data may be sensitive and what data may be non-sensitive, and then they are directed to store the sensitive information in the protected folder. As part of our security policies, we may want to add compliance policies and procedures so that everyone understands the proper processes to use for security in your environment. You might also train users on what the proper security policies might be. And another example of a directive control may be a sign that you put on a door that says authorized personnel only. There might not be a lock on the door, but the sign saying authorized personnel only directs people to either enter or not enter that particular door. So to summarize these, our file storage policies will direct people to this technical category. A compliance policy fits into a managerial category. Someone performing a security policy training course would be a directive control type fitting into the operational category. And a sign on a door that says authorized personnel only fits into the physical category. The examples I provided for the different security controls and the categories where they fit are simply one single example. You could probably think of a number of different examples that you could fit into any of those squares in our matrix. You could probably also think of different security controls that might fit into a different category of control or a different type of control. You might also find as our technology changes and our security processes evolve that there might be new control types that we could fit into our chart. And of course, not everybody uses the same security controls, so the ones that you use in your organization may be very different than someone else's organization.
There's the Cover My Leak cover-up, or there's the Tampax dual protection system to help stop leaks.
The CIA triad is an easy way to remember the fundamentals of IT security. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as the AIC triad to differentiate it from the federal organization in the US called the Central Intelligence Agency. But since it's so easy to remember CIA, we often refer to the CIA triad instead of the AIC triad. But keep in mind that the CIA triad has nothing to do with the CIA being the Central Intelligence Agency. The C in the CIA triad is confidentiality. We want to prevent someone from gaining access to private information. We need to provide that information in a confidential way. The I in CIA is the integrity, where if we're sending information from one person to another, we want to be sure that the recipient really is receiving exactly what was sent from the origination. And lastly, the A in the CIA triad refers to availability. Obviously, we want to be sure that all of our systems remain up and running at all times, even if we're implementing some type of IT security. You often see the triad written as a triangle, and each leg of the triangle has the confidentiality, the availability, and the integrity listed as the security objectives associated with the triad. One of the biggest challenges we have in IT security is making data available to others, but making sure that availability is only to the right people. We refer to this as confidentiality. One way that we provide this confidentiality is through encryption. We can have one person encrypt data, send it to someone else, and that other person can then decrypt that data to be able to see the original plain text. Obviously, anyone in the middle who happens to get access to that encrypted data has no idea what's on the inside, and if they were to look at that data, they would not be able to discern anything important from that information. Another common way to provide confidentiality is to set limits on what someone may have access to. We commonly do this with access controls. We can limit who might have access to certain types of information. For example, this might allow someone in the marketing department to be able to see all of the marketing presentations and be able to make changes to those, but it will prevent all access to any of the accounting information of the organization. And if you've ever had to provide additional authentication factors when logging into a system, that's another type of confidentiality. Someone would not be able to access an account unless they had the proper authentication credentials, and adding those additional factors provides more confidentiality. When we're receiving data from a third party, we'd like to be able to verify that the data that we have received is exactly the same data that was sent, and that nobody has made changes to that data while it was traversing the network. We're able to do that by using methods of integrity. One way to provide integrity is by hashing. The person sending the data will create a hash of the data and send you both the data and the hash at the same time. When you receive the data, you'll perform the same hashing function, and if your hash matches the sender's hash, then you know the data that you've received is exactly the same as the data that was sent. We can enhance this integrity by including a digital signature when we're sending data, which takes a hash and encrypts it with an asymmetric encryption algorithm. This means that we can check to make sure that none of the data has changed, and we can confirm the person who sent the data. That provides an additional level of integrity that could be important if you're sending very sensitive data. It's also common to use certificates to be able to identify devices or people and provide additional factors of integrity, especially when you're transferring data from one device to another. And lastly, we have the concept of non-repudiation. This means that we have proof of integrity and we can confirm without a doubt that the information that we've received really did come from the originating party. If you've done any work in information technology, you know how important it is for your systems to be available. Availability is that leg of the CIA triad that ensures that people have access to the data that they'd like to view. One way to provide this availability is to have systems that are designed to always be up and running. We might combine this with a system that has fault tolerance, where we have multiple components, and if one of those components fails, the other component can pick up and continue to operate normally. And of course, if you're concerned about systems being available, you'll constantly need to make sure that they are managed and updated by patching those systems. This ensures that the systems are always as stable as possible and that we can close any existing security holes, preventing someone from gaining access through some type of exploit.
Lowe's knows when you need a new appliance, you need it fast. So we offer next day delivery on hundreds of appliances. Plus, members save more. And we'll haul away your old one. When you need it fast, we've got you covered. Shop Lowe's today. We help, you save.
Intuition, the instinct inside, the second nature that acts first, the answers that create actions, the humanity that defines you, the understanding that can't be overlooked, the inner voice over the noise, the feeling, the focus that fuels the fire is intuition. Ask yourself and listen, it's intuition. Available at Macy's, the fragrance destination.
One of the important foundations of cryptography is ensuring that when someone sends data to a third party, that third party is able to verify that that information really came from the sender. This is something that we think of all the time as part of a contract. We sign a contract at the bottom, it's our name, it's our signature, and if somebody was to look at this contract later, they could see our signature and could reasonably say that the contract was signed by us. Just like our signed contract, we have a similar set of features in cryptography. And today we'll look at how this non-repudiation works using proof of integrity and using proof of origin with high assurance of authenticity. Proof of integrity means that any data that we've received, we can verify that it's exactly the same data that was originally sent. This means that our data is accurate, consistent, and we know that nothing inside of the data we've received has been changed. In cryptography, we can accomplish this by using a hash. A hash is a short string of text that we can create based on data that is contained within the plain text. This is sometimes referred to as a message digest or something like a fingerprint. This means that if anything changes with that data, we'll have a different fingerprint or a different hash. This is the same as an actual fingerprint. If the person changes, you'll see that the fingerprint is very different. Although a hash is very good at verifying the integrity of the data, it doesn't associate that data with a particular individual. We can verify that the data that we've received is exactly the same as the data that was sent, but we can't verify who sent the data. However, there are ways to provide that additional integrity. We'll talk about those in just a moment. Let's see how this hashing works by using a practical example. There is an organization called Project Gutenberg on the internet, and they have published the Gutenberg Encyclopedia. I've downloaded volume 1 of that encyclopedia, and it's 8.1 megabytes of data. And then I ran an application that took all of that data and created a hash or a fingerprint on that particular encyclopedia, volume 1. And here is the exact hash that I've created from that volume. Now, if I was to change one character inside of that file, anywhere, although the size of the file is exactly the same after making the change, somewhere in that haystack of data, there is some type of difference. But it'd be very difficult for a human to read through all of that data, 8.1 megabytes of text, and somehow determine where that individual change might be. But if you perform a hash of the changed data, you'll see that the hash value that I create is very different than the hash value that was original. So if I have downloaded this file, perform my own hash, and compare it to the original, I can see that something has indeed changed with this particular volume 1 of the Gutenberg Encyclopedia. At this point, we might want to download again to see if we happen to get a corrupted or modified version, or perhaps we perform a diff or a comparison between those two files to see exactly where the change might be between the original version of the volume 1 and the version that we received. By using these hashes, we're able to provide proof of integrity. We know if anything was changed when the information was sent from the original sender. But we can also add to this an additional level of integrity called proof of origin, where we can verify the person that sent the data to us. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as an authentication when we are looking at the source of the message. By using a digital signature, we provide non-repudiation. So not only do we know the person that has sent that data to us, but anyone else could examine this transaction and verify that the information we received really did come from the sending party. Just as someone can use a pen and paper to sign a contract and send it to you, in cryptography we use a digital signature. This digital signature uses a private key that is only known to the person who's sending the data. No one else has a copy of this private key. To verify that private key was used, we use the public key associated with that private key, and that way we can assure that the information we receive is not only the same as what it was sent, but we know that it had to be sent by the person who provided the digital signature. In practical terms, adding a digital signature to a document is usually created by clicking a box that says add a digital signature, and a lot of cryptography happens behind the scenes. Let's lift the hood a little bit and see what that process might be that's taking place when you check that box to add a digital signature. We'll start with a conversation that's occurring between Alice and Bob. Alice is sending a message to Bob that says, "You're hired, Bob." And the first thing that Alice will do is provide a digital signature before she sends it. The first thing that happens when she clicks that checkbox for the digital signature is that a hashing algorithm creates a hash of that plain text. In this case, the plain text is, "You're hired, Bob." Once that hash is created, we now need to have some way to verify that it really came from Alice. And since Alice is the only one with her private key, we're going to encrypt that hash with Alice's private key, take that encrypted hash, send it along with the plain text so that Bob is going to receive a message that says, "You're hired, Bob," and then attached to that message is a digital signature. In most cases, Alice is going to send that message over to Bob using email or some other type of electronic delivery. Bob is going to receive exactly that message that was sent. It says, "You're hired, Bob," with the digital signature included with it. Bob is going to use Alice's public key, which is a key available to anybody, and he's going to
What I want to do is share my
signature and decrypted claim to be a particular user on that system. The check between your username, your password, and the other authentication factors is referred to as authentication. This proves that we really are who we say we are because we knew the secret password or we had some additional authentication factors that we could use to help prove that we are that person. Now that we've identified who we are, we now need to determine what type of access we have, and that's done through authorization. If we're part of the shipping and receiving department, then we should have access to systems that should only be available to shipping and receiving, and we should not have access to information that might be in the finance department. And of course, all security systems need to have a log of exactly what happened. So we need to know what time someone logged in, how much data may have been sent or received, and what time this person logged out. We refer to this entire system as the AAA framework, and this refers to authentication, authorization, and accounting. Let's have a look at a practical example of using AAA. We're going to use the example of logging into a VPN server. In this case, it would be a firewall or VPN concentrator in the middle. You're on one side of that concentrator, and you need to use AAA to gain access to an internal file server. So we'll start with our client on the internet, and we'll access the VPN concentrator, which prompts us for a login. So we're going to provide a username and password and send that information over to the VPN concentrator. The concentrator itself doesn't have any information about usernames, passwords, authentication factors, or anything else. And in most organizations, all of that information is stored on a central server, and we refer to that as a AAA server. This AAA server is going to receive the request from the VPN concentrator asking if the username, password, and other information that was provided matches some type of user in the database. And if the match is true, it sends back information to the concentrator and says those credentials are approved. At that point, the concentrator knows that we really are the person we claim to be, and it allows us access into the internal file server. As a security professional, you'll be responsible for managing the security on hundreds or perhaps even thousands of separate systems. And in many cases, you'll never have physical access or even be able to see where those systems might be because they may be located anywhere in the world. So the question now becomes, how can we verify that a computer trying to connect to our network is a computer that's authorized to be on our network? This computer by itself obviously can't type a password to prove who it might be, and in most cases you probably wouldn't want to store a password on one of your systems out in the field anyway. So how can you really confirm that that system is allowed to be on our internal network? How do we provide that additional authentication? In many cases, we use a certificate that we put onto this device that is digitally signed, and we check that authentication during the login process. This allows anyone needing to provide that verification with a way to confirm that that really is a company-owned laptop. This could be on a VPN concentrator so that it can verify that the devices coming into the network really are company devices, or perhaps it's management software that can validate that end device that may be either on our local network or anywhere in the world. The process for creating this certificate is relatively straightforward, but the one thing that you must have in your environment is something called a certificate authority, or a CA. This is a device or software that is responsible for managing all of the certificates in our environment. On the CA itself, you would create a certificate just for that laptop. That certificate is now digitally signed by the certificate authority so that later on we can verify that it really is an original certificate from our certificate authority. Now we put that certificate on the laptop, and anytime we want to perform an authentication, we can use that certificate as an authentication factor and verify that it really was digitally signed by the certificate authority. So as part of your security infrastructure, you would have a certificate authority. That certificate authority itself has its own certificate that was signed by a root CA. We also have our laptop in the field, and we have previously created a device certificate just for this machine, and it has been signed by the CA. Once we know the CA certificate and we know the device certificate, we can then compare these two certificates, and we can see that our device certificate was signed by the certificate authority that we trust in our security infrastructure. Now that we've gone through the authentication process, how do we authorize that device to have access to resources within our network? We would do that by using an authorization model. And there are many different authorization models to choose from. We have a big list of these later on in the video series in section 4.6. We would commonly authorize users and services to have access to certain types of data and applications. The challenge here is, how do you create this relationship in a form that's able to easily scale for tens, hundreds, or even thousands of users? In many environments, we accomplish this by taking the users and services and putting an authorization model right in the middle before you access the data and the applications. These are commonly defined by roles, organizations, attributes, and many other types of characteristics. Let's say that you had no authorization model at all. We would create a series of rights and permissions where the user has rights to access the resource. The problem is that
Morning, Mike.
this doesn't scale very well. Let's take an example of somebody in the
Ain't get no sleep, huh?
department. This is someone who needs access to a large number of systems, a lot of data. Maybe there's tracking information, shipping
Mr. T, you
labels,
gonna have to mail,
databases of customers.
you have to
and we
Uber
would
Michael
create
a Red Bull.
separate rights and permissions so that anytime this person logged in, we would need to give them rights to create a shipping label, track a shipment, view monthly shipment reports, access customer data, and perhaps anything else they need for their day-to-day operations. Now, if this is the only person in shipping and receiving, this is a relatively easy process. But what if you're part of a larger organization that has tens or hundreds of people in shipping and receiving? You can see it would be difficult to take every single user account and manually set up rights and permissions for every single resource that they need access to. In this case, there's only 3 resources, but imagine if there were tens or hundreds of resources. You would need to set those up for the tens or hundreds of users. You can see now why this would be very difficult to scale. To be able to scale, we would need to use an authorization model. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as an abstraction that allows us to separate the users from the information they're trying to access. This greatly streamlines the process of administering these large number of users or large number of resources, and we can support a very, very large infrastructure just with a very simple set of abstractions. Here's how this would work. We'd have the same user in shipping and receiving, and we will add them to a group called shipping and receiving. We set this group up originally so that anybody added to the shipping and receiving group would have access to create a shipping label, track a shipment, view monthly shipment reports, have access to customer contact information, and anything else you would need in shipping and receiving. Now let's add in our tens or hundreds of users. Instead of